I mean, I just fell in love with him. Watching my childhood friend say this with a sleazy grin, I struggled to keep myself from bursting out laughing. Oh really, you fell in love, huh? Well, by all means, make my husband happy then. Here, you can have this man. So, from now on, you two share all the joys and sorrows together as a married couple. Though I doubt there will be much joy. My name is Kate. I'm a 48-year-old woman with little patience, even if I say so myself. If I find something annoying or troublesome, I give up easily. In a way, you could say I'm quick to make decisions, right? What? I should try harder? Well, I used to be one of those overachievers, but due to certain experiences, I've come to love my current laid-back personality. It all started when I was very young, too young to even remember much. My parents moved with another couple and lived in houses next to each other. Why did that happen? Because my parents and that couple were childhood friends too. For childhood friends, who became couples, got married around the same time, and even got pregnant at the same time. And since their kids were the same age, they decided to live next to each other to stay close. This is how I, Kate, and the girl next door, Loretta, became destined to be childhood friends even before we were born. Hearing just the story, many might think it's wonderful to have two generations of families being such close friends. I think so too. But that only works if the childhood friend has a good personality. Unfortunately, my childhood friend had a terribly bad one. Our parents were so close that they would often go to each other's houses and have dinner together, so Loretta and I were raised almost like sisters. We were always together, so much so that before we entered kindergarten, both Loretta and I thought of each other as sisters. We didn't have any concept of who was the older or younger sister, but I remember Loretta often acted like she was my older sister. Looking back, it might have all started when we found out we weren't actually sisters. I don't remember exactly when, as we were too young, but for some reason, Loretta started mimicking my mannerisms. Our parents would say, "Maybe Loretta felt lonely after realizing she wasn't your sister." Mimicking Kate might be her way of saying she's closest to you. There might have been some truth to that, but since we were kids, it's hard to tell what Loretta really felt. Mimicking my mannerisms was cute and our parents found it amusing. But as Loretta grew older, she wanted the same things I had, answered the same way I did when asked about food preferences, and behaved as if she wanted to become my copy. Our parents saw us as two peas in a pod, but in reality, I was the one being copied. I couldn't pinpoint why. But Loretta's behavior started to make me uncomfortable as a child, and I began to get angry at her for copying me. However, our parents misunderstood this as me throwing tantrums. Well, it's no wonder. When asked why it bothered me, I could only say, I don't like it, and being a child, I was bad at explaining things. Every time, I was told to get along, and no one understood my true feelings. As I grew up, I started to feel the weight of having a childhood friend like Loretta, and eventually, I entered elementary school. From around this time, the relationship between Loretta and me completely changed. The reason is that, by the time you reach elementary school, a natural hierarchy forms within the class. Athletic, cute, and energetic, Loretta belonged to the top tier of the class. Although Loretta and I were never in the same class, her prominence made her well known even among students from other classes. In my class, everyone thought of Loretta as the cute and noticeable girl. On the other hand, I was ordinary, neither particularly noticeable nor forgettable. Not exceptionally plain, but nothing remarkable either. My grades, athletic ability, and appearance were all average, making me a common presence. I was content with this position since I had no desire to stand out. But Loretta began to treat me with a slightly superior attitude. She never directly said anything, but I felt she regarded me as beneath her. In reality, I was indeed inferior to Loretta, and it was understandable that others saw it that way. To be honest, I had found Loretta troublesome since we were young, which only made me dislike her even more. Since we were in different classes, we could have easily become distant school friends. However, our parents were close friends, so we had to spend a lot of time together. I even told my parents that I didn't want to be with Loretta, but they dismissed it as typical teenage selfishness. My parents, who had never dealt with a difficult childhood friend, couldn't understand the concept of disliking one. They believed that having a childhood friend you could stay close with was wonderful, so my feelings never got through to them. I was set to attend the local elementary and middle schools. This meant that I wouldn't be able to separate from Loretta until high school. That's a long way off. I sighed every day. Then, one day, at the piano school Loretta and I attended, the performers for an upcoming recital were announced. Only the top 3 students would be selected, and I was one of them. I had started piano because I loved it, but after Loretta decided she also wanted to play and joined the same school, it became a burden. But it was worth the effort. Hard work does pay off. I was overjoyed and felt a surge of pride when a girl who had participated in the previous recital said, "Congratulations! That's amazing, Kate!" "Thank you," I replied with a beaming smile. "It's good that you finally did well at something," Loretta interjected. Her words were clearly barbed, leaving the girl who congratulated me at a loss for words. But Loretta, sensing the tension, continued, "Are you sure Kate can handle the recital? Don't wet yourself on stage." She sneered maliciously. The word wet caused an exaggerated reaction among the kids. The celebratory mood instantly turned into, "Kate, you wet the bed!" It was something that happened back in preschool. I hadn't wet the bed since becoming an elementary student. However, for children, the truth didn't matter. They were only interested in the amusing story in front of them. No matter how loudly I insisted, "I don't wet the bed anymore," the kids laughed and said, "You're still a baby." Or, "That's so embarrassing." The teacher eventually intervened, but the teasing continued for a long time afterward. However, I had a competition coming up. I was determined to prove my skills and show them all what I could do. "Kate, let's play dodgeball." "Huh?" As usual, Loretta came over to my house, bringing along some of her classmates. "I'm going to play with my classmates. Come join us, Kate." "What? But I'm the only one from a different class. You should all play together." "I want to play with you too, Kate," Loretta pleaded. "Please." Everyone commented on how close we seemed, but, honestly, I found the invitation bothersome. I wanted to be away from Loretta for even a single second, yet I couldn't find a way to refuse. Somehow, I ended up joining their class's dodgeball game. I would later regret this decision. Once the dodgeball game started, it was clear that many of Loretta's classmates were in sports clubs, and the game quickly became intense. I'm not very athletic, so I was desperately trying to dodge the balls. Then Loretta, "Kate, catch the ball! Stop running away!" shouted. I was bewildered, thinking, I can't catch such a fast ball, but Loretta's teammates joined in. "Kate, now! You could have caught that one! Come on, catch it!" and heckles me. Their shouts were intimidating, and I reluctantly reached for the ball, but I couldn't catch it properly. I was afraid of getting hit and being sent to the outfield, and I didn't know what to do when suddenly, out of nowhere, Loretta body slammed me. I lost my balance and fell awkwardly to the ground, twisting my left wrist badly in the process. Meanwhile, Loretta had caught the ball without needing to slam into me at all. "Sorry, I got too into it and bumped into you," she said with a smile. She didn't seem sorry at all. At first, I was in shock and didn't realize it, but my wrist hurt incredibly. Loretta's classmates gathered around my tearful self, and we had to stop the dodgeball game so I could go home and visit the hospital. The diagnosis was a fractured left wrist. 3 months to heal. I wouldn't be able to participate in the piano competition. When Loretta saw me with my arm in a cast up to my elbow, she smiled and said, "That must have been tough," in a voice that pretended to be concerned. I wasn't fooled by her mismatched expression and words. I was certain Loretta had invited me to play dodgeball just to injure me. Even though I was sure, I had no proof, and that was frustrating. Why did I have such a person as my childhood friend? Filled with helplessness, I cried alone in my bed that night. Since I couldn't compete, Loretta was chosen to take my place. "I'll do my best for you, Kate." Looking very pleased. I was the one initially selected, and Loretta hadn't made the cut. Swallowing my resentment towards Loretta, I simply replied, "Good luck. Good luck." Loretta continued to play small pranks on me, but I started to reduce the time I spent with her by focusing on my studies. My parents said, "You don't have to study so much. You're still a child, you should enjoy playing too." But whenever I played with someone else, Loretta would somehow tag along. It was all because we lived next door. She was probably watching my every move. To avoid playing with Loretta, I decided not to play with anyone at all. I couldn't understand whether Loretta liked me or disliked me. However, it was becoming increasingly clear that she was a bothersome presence to me. Feeling the cracks forming in our relationship, we moved on to middle school. After-school classes are mandatory. Kate, what are you going to choose? Maybe tennis. Oh, I'll do that too. Loretta naturally tried to pick the same class as me. But this was all within my expectations. After that, without telling Loretta, I signed up for a cooking class, while she believed me and joined the tennis team. Finally, I thought I could get away from her. But no. In less than a week, Loretta quit tennis and switched to the cooking class to follow me. "You should tell me if you're going to change," she said casually. Because of this, the members of the cooking class mistakenly thought Loretta and I were good friends, and my attempts to distance myself from her were seen as cold. Honestly, Loretta had orchestrated it that way. But as a middle schooler, I was determined not to be outdone by Loretta. I started avoiding her as much as possible on the way to and from school and used studying as an excuse to not eat with her. Of course, it was hard to refuse every time in front of our parents, so I only declined occasionally, but I felt much lighter. Next was high school. My parents probably wouldn't allow me to go to a boarding school, but if I chose a school in the opposite direction from Loretta's, our interactions would decrease. I'll study hard so I can get into any school I want. With that in mind, I started studying in the library after school when there were no after-school classes. At first, I just sat at the desk and studied, but since I went there frequently, a 9th grader named Dominic, who worked as a librarian, started talking to me. Apparently, it was rare for a 7th grader to come to study. I understood that it was just consideration for a younger student, but I started to feel attracted to the calm and older Dominic. He was very kind and helped me with my studies. He explained things very clearly. As we began talking more about various things, I, who had no interest in novels, started reading the books Dominic recommended. They say love changes people, and it's true. I think I was floating on my first love. That's why I was off my guard. "Oh? Are you here for the library too, Kate?" One afternoon, when I went to the library as usual, there was Loretta. She acted like it was a coincidence, but it definitely wasn't. She had been watching my actions as usual. Even though I knew Loretta was that kind of person, why did I start going to the library so often? I deeply regretted letting myself get carried away because I liked Dominic, a ninth grader. Knowing my feelings. The library is nice. It's relaxing. Maybe I'll start coming with you, Kate, she said. I wanted to shout, please don't, but Dominic appeared behind me. Oh? Is she a friend? He asked. Before I could answer. We're childhood friends, Loretta said with a smile. Childhood friends, huh? That sounds nice. I'm an only child, so I kind of envy that, Dominic said, and before I knew it, the two of them were engrossed in conversation. I couldn't interrupt their conversation, and I felt like my place had been taken away. It was depressing. As she had declared, Loretta started coming to the library with me from that day on. I knew that if I didn't go to the library and stayed in my room to study, my interactions with Loretta would decrease. I really hated Loretta, but I also wanted to see Dominic's face just as much. In the end, I kept going to the library, allowing Loretta to invade my sanctuary. One day, Kate, do you have a crush on anyone? Loretta asked me. And she did it right in front of Dominic. I responded, my voice suddenly high-pitched and surprised, something I immediately noticed myself. Of course, Loretta also understood everything from just my voice. I still remember the smug smile that appeared on her face. Dominic noticed my discomfort and said, So Loretta, do you have a crush on anyone? He redirected the question to her, probably expecting Loretta to blush and say something like, even if I did, I wouldn't tell you. But instead, yes, I do. It's the person right in front of me, she said, pointing at Dominic. Dominic's face turned bright red in an instant. It was over, I thought. Seeing my stunned expression, Loretta gave me the same smug smile again. Looking back now, my feelings for Dominic were probably obvious to any girl. Dominic never noticed, but being caught up in my first crush, I couldn't hide my feelings. I would blush just talking to him, and my voice would often rise when we studied together and our faces got close. Loretta, who had known me since childhood, could easily see through my obvious feelings. My catchphrases, hobbies, after-school classes, and even my belongings. Loretta wanted and copied everything I had. I guess she wanted my crush too. In front of me, filled with despair, Loretta asked Dominic, Will you go out with me? Dominic, flustered, said, I don't really know you that well. But a month later, the two started dating. They even made a point to tell me about their relationship. I still think I shouldn't have gone to the library if it was going to hurt so much. After that, I stopped going to the library, and before I knew it, Loretta and Dominic had broken up. Maybe Loretta lost interest because I gave up on Dominic. I focused even more on my studies and eventually became a high school student. When applying to high schools, I kept my preferred school a secret from Loretta, but my parents found out, and I almost ended up going to the same school as her. I chose a boarding school that was significantly below my level. Loretta threw a tantrum about going to the same high school, but my chosen school had a bad reputation with previous students being arrested, so Loretta's parents stopped her from going there. I should have aimed lower from the start. Despite my parents crying, I successfully separated myself from her. I continued my studies in high school and eventually got into a top-tier university, moving out of state. Because it was a boarding school, I had measures in place to deceive my parents about my real college preference, so Loretta and I ended up in different universities. By the time we started working, We both found jobs out of state and became estranged. Eventually, I married a man named Eric whom I met at work. Life was going smoothly, but in the summer of our first year of marriage, when we returned to my parents' house for Thanksgiving with Eric, I saw Loretta again. Loretta was also married and was visiting her parents for the first time in a while. Then our parents said, "Since it's been a while, let's have a family dinner together." And we ended up having a meal with Loretta's family, my family, and our parents. Well, I thought if I could just endure this one day, I would somehow manage. It was about half a year after Thanksgiving. Eric's affair came to light. And the other person was Loretta. How did I find out? I caught them in the act, in a car parked in our driveway early in the morning. It turns out they had exchanged contact information during that visit home and had been seeing each other frequently since. Loretta is currently separated from her husband and lives nearby. According to Eric, he made the first move on Loretta, but I suspect it was Loretta who orchestrated the whole thing. She must have wanted what was mine again. Both of them said they had fallen for each other and wanted a divorce, and I, "Fine, have it your way," ended up getting divorced in a fit of anger. After that, I moved to another state and changed jobs. I met and married a man named Freddie who runs his own business. We had a child, and just as I thought I had regained my happy days. When my child started elementary school, I froze at the entrance ceremony. There was Loretta, with a child who looked just like Eric. "Hey, long time no see." Loretta greeted me cheerfully. "What are you doing here?" I was stunned. "I told your parents I wanted to apologize to Kate for taking Eric, and they told me where to find you," Loretta replied. Needless to say, I was furious with my parents. After the divorce from Eric, my parents had been on my side, understanding the reason for our split. But after I remarried and had a child, they started thinking, "You should reconcile since you were childhood friends." I understood their feelings since our situation had strained their relationship with Eric's parents, but there was no way I could make up with someone who took Eric from me. "It looks like our kids are in the same class, so let's get along as mom friends from now on," Loretta said with a smile. It was only the entrance ceremony, but I secretly thought, I wish it were already graduation. After that, Loretta stuck to me as a childhood friend among the mom friends gatherings. But her demeanor hadn't changed, and I could sense her subtle intimidation in her words. Comments like, "You've aged since having a child," or "Your husband will lose interest in you." She often indirectly criticized my femininity, as if reminding me that she had taken my husband in the past. Many mom friends admired Loretta's communication skills, leaving me no room to counter her. If it had only affected me, I could have spoken up, but I was worried about how it would affect my child if there were rifts among the mom friends. To make matters worse, the community seemed tightly knit, with frequent family barbecues and camping events. Having to interact with both Loretta and Eric was nothing but stress for me. Well, luckily, my current husband Freddie knows about my past with Loretta. Having an understanding partner by my side was a great comfort. Or so I thought. Because I fell in love. What? One day, Freddie asked me to make time to talk, and we arranged to discuss things at home while our child was at school. The concerned party who showed up was none other than Loretta. Apparently, they were now having an affair. Again? "Why do you always take what's mine?" I accused Loretta, but she, "Because I fell in love. Can't help it," gave me an answer that wasn't an answer at all. "You know, because we're both serious, I want to divorce Eric and remarry." "Oh, should I return your ex-husband?" Loretta laughed as she said this. "I don't want him. You can have both of the men." Seriously, right? To be with someone like Freddie, ha ha ha, good luck with that. But I won't tell her the truth. Thinking this, I answered with a smile. I'll divorce him for you. 1 month later, Loretta came to my house. What is going on? Why didn't you tell me? What are you talking about? I pretended to be clueless. Of course, Loretta saw right through me. Don't play dumb. And got angry. Why didn't you tell me Freddie was unemployed? Did I need to? You wanted to remarry because you truly love him, right? I'd like to see some spirit like, I'll support him. You knew and didn't tell me on purpose. Of course. In fact, we were already talking about divorce before you even asked for it. What? Loretta's eyes widened at my words. Freddie didn't just lose his job, he also took on a lot of debt to try to save his company. We had a huge fight because I hadn't been told about it. You probably thought you took my husband from me and felt triumphant, but actually, I was just giving away someone I didn't want. Loretta, now understanding everything. What? Raised her voice. So, you knew and still went through with not just the division of assets, but also filed for alimony and child support? Of course. It's only natural for me to claim what I'm owed, and it's offensive to be called a bad woman for it. You're the worst. And you have the nerve to say that? You brought this on yourself. Just like before, you probably thought you'd have Freddie pay for everything, but he doesn't have any money left. You'll have to pay it yourself. This is the worst. Because of you, my life is a mess. I'm grateful, really. Thanks for taking a nearly bankrupt, cheating husband off my hands. I smiled as Loretta burst into tears. My previous husband had income from investments, so even when I demanded compensation in the divorce trial, he paid it easily. So Loretta probably thought, if I remarry, we'll be husband and wife, and my new husband can pay everything as well. After all, she knew Freddie was making a decent living from his business. She must have been counting on that. But not only did her plan fail, it turned out he was in debt and completely unreliable. Well, no wonder she's crying. Serves her right. I got this house as part of the divorce settlement, but I'm planning to sell it and move. So what? Loretta glared at me as if even hearing my words was annoying. She still didn't seem to understand her position. She looked like she thought she was still on top. Time to show her hell. I'm going to tell all the mom friends about your misdeeds. What? Whether they side with me or not, you'll at least have to deal with being talked about behind your back. I'll just move away too. You're such an idiot. Don't you know your husband's personality? Husband? Which one? What are you talking about? I'm talking about my ex-husband, Eric. He's very jealous. If you mention divorce, he'll probably start stalking you. Good luck with that, I added, and Loretta froze. Switching to another man and being abandoned, there's no way he'd allow that. Ha ha ha, I can't wait to see what happens next. With that, I walked back home, ignoring Loretta, who stood there in shock. Loretta rang the doorbell multiple times. Please reconsider the compensation from the divorce settlement. She pleaded, but I ignored her completely. Later on, shortly before I moved out, a certain flyer was distributed around the neighborhood. It exposed Loretta's infidelity. It even listed all her past relationships. For the record, it wasn't me. However, since the flyer described Loretta's behavior inside the house, it was clear that my first husband, Eric, whom Loretta had divorced, was the one behind it. Meanwhile, despite it being half a year since the divorce, Loretta hadn't remarried. This was because her second husband, Freddie, who had paid me the compensation and child support in cash, had gone bankrupt. He still intended to start fresh with Loretta, but then came the flyer scandal. When Freddie learned about Loretta's entire dating history, he abandoned her. Loretta herself might have intended to abandon him, but since she was abandoned first, she was quite bitter. Her once sweet demeanor had turned harsh, perhaps due to constant irritation. Seeing Loretta's living conditions and behavior, her parents decided, "Our daughter can't raise a child in her current state," and took the child into their care. Those who had been close to Loretta were no longer her friends, as she no longer had a child and was no longer part of the mom circle. Moreover, hearing about her promiscuous lifestyle, they were disillusioned. Vandalism and harassment increased at Loretta's house, and she was told to leave the community. She wanted to move but had no money, and although she wanted to sue over the flyer, money was still an issue. On top of that, Eric continued to stalk Loretta. He planned to reconcile for money, but Eric wasn't that foolish. "I want you to see the real me, so I won't remarry," he said, and continued to watch over her to prevent her from finding a new man. It was really creepy. Meanwhile, I moved out of state with my child and am now working hard as a single mother. I've had enough of marriage, so from now on, I plan to live putting my son first. As I've gotten older and lost my grip strength, he helps open jars for me, and when I'm exhausted, he gives me massages. He's really grown into a kind boy. Although Loretta ensured I had terrible luck with men, when it comes to my son, you could say I had good luck with one male. Though it's a different kind of meaning than usual. We're not particularly wealthy, nor am I a career woman working solely for my job. It's just an ordinary day-to-day life. But for someone who's had a tumultuous life, the warm daily life with my son and 3 cats is the happiest time I've ever had. Since then, Loretta hasn't appeared before me. Well, it's understandable given the trauma she's caused me and the fact that Eric is watching her, so she can't do anything rash. At last, I feel like I've found true happiness. Now, I need to wake up early tomorrow and make lunch for my son. I'll do my best this week too. Yay! Let's turn this place into a bed and breakfast, my husband, David, announced, and both my daughter Jennifer and I gasped in surprise. "What are you talking about?" As I voiced my shock, I became certain that the scene before us was indeed where my childhood home had been demolished. "Can you explain this to us in a way we can understand? Is this your fault?" I pressed David, who stood there with his usual malicious grin. Seeing him like that, Jennifer suddenly burst into laughter. "Wait, stop, Dad." It seemed that the absurdity and hilarity of her father's incomprehensible actions and long-standing control over us were finally hitting her. Panting, Jennifer exclaimed, "Grandpa's house was worth a fortune." Then, suddenly turning serious, she added, "What you did is literally a crime." David seemed to realize too late the irreparable mistake he had made. "My name is Barbara, a 48-year-old housewife. I currently live with my husband David and our daughter Jennifer, who is 19 and in her first year of college but has no plans to move out anytime soon. Having Jennifer, who has been on my side since she was a child, remain in our home is a blessing, especially with David as a common adversary. David and I met back when I was still working as an office employee, having graduated from a community college and worked as a clerk at a local trading company. David, who worked in sales at another company, frequently visited. Though sales sounds prestigious, he was more like a jack of all trades for various companies. Always eager to please and flashing insincere smiles, he managed to make a good impression on me by being nice, even to a mere clerk like myself. As we saw each other almost weekly, we started chatting and eventually became close. It turned out that he was indeed treated like a utility person at his job, earning little. Perhaps because of my youth, I believed that love could conquer all financial challenges. After I became pregnant, I quit my job as he wanted me to focus on childcare. He wanted me to join the family so he could focus on raising his children. With Jennifer's birth, my responsibilities grew immensely. I was left to care for Jennifer, cook, clean, and do laundry alone while he was at work. However, as Jennifer started preschool, his attitude towards me began to change. Taking my silence for granted, his demeanor grew increasingly domineering. At work, he was ridiculed and overworked. And it seems I became his outlet for frustration. I had not perceived him as such a resentful person when we first met, but perhaps I was too agreeable, fueling his distorted confidence. People at work just dump their tasks on you, David, because they don't recognize his talents. You shouldn't worry about it. I would console him, inadvertently feeding his skewed self-esteem. Are you mocking me, thinking you can do a better job? He would explode at the slightest criticism. This left me overwhelmed, eventually silencing me completely. My attempts to pacify him only served to inflate his ego further. Enduring for the sake of our daughter undoubtedly led to our current strained relationship. Yet, I believe I was only trying to be a supportive wife, not deserving of blame. Reflecting on it, the whole situation seems absurd, but my desire to do everything for my daughter clouded my judgment. As we aged, our marital problems only worsened. While my role as a housewife remained unchanged, societal expectations about age-appropriate status and positions subtly influenced us. His perception of external judgment grew, worsening his already pessimistic nature. Conversations with him became so exhausting that they felt overwhelmingly draining. I never realized it until we got married, but it seems David has always been this way since childhood, lacking any friends. At our wedding, it was only David's relatives who attended, with no friends in sight. I didn't think much of it then, but in hindsight, it's quite odd. I still regret not noticing these small details about David while we were dating. Although his position at his company is considered low by societal standards, there are many others in similar situations. I can understand being upset if criticized by family at home, but I have never once complained to him about such matters. No matter what I do, David's attitude remains unchanged. He never releases his stress outside, it's always directed at me and Jennifer. His drinking has increased day by day, and with it, his loud and destructive behavior at home. Though he has never physically harmed us, his actions have escalated. Do you even recognize who's responsible for you being able to attend college? Always clinging to mom, you should think about who you ought to be thanking. It's common to hear about teenage daughters disliking their fathers, but Jennifer has good reasons for her feelings towards David. It's only natural to feel this way after being treated so unfairly every day. Jennifer and I would share our grievances about David when he wasn't around, somehow managing to get through each day. Then, my father, who lives in the same state, fell ill. My mother had passed away a few years earlier, leaving my father living alone at home. Since my brother Paul is running a company in New York, it fell to me to check on my father. The diagnosis my father received at the hospital was not good. I blamed myself for not noticing his condition sooner. Despite being aware of his own health issues, my father kept silent, not wanting to worry my brother or me, who both have our own families. After consulting with the doctor, hospitalization was decided upon, and we proceeded with the best treatment available. Still, it was clear that my father's condition was deteriorating day by day, prompting my brother to visit more frequently, taking time off from his company. I was prepared for what was to come, naturally resulting in frequent hospital visits. Being a housewife doesn't mean household chores can continue as before. Jennifer also helped out, visiting my father and assisting me. However, David didn't see it that way. Lately, there's been a lot more frozen food, hasn't there? You're home all day, there's no need for frozen meals. And relying on our daughter just now. You should consider our life here too. He took the opportunity to scold me and even complained about my father. After all the care my father had provided, it's shocking he could say such things. Has he forgotten how much he has inconvenienced my father? There was a time when David's earnings were insufficient to support us. In exchange for quitting my job to focus on childcare, our living expenses increased with the addition of one person. Without feeling any remorse, he pressured me to figure it out. At my wit's end, I explained the situation to my father and asked for financial assistance. Knowing his situation, my father silently provided the necessary funds without complaint. Unaware of my father's sacrifice, he took this for granted and depended on his generosity for a while. Although his income eventually increased, he never expressed gratitude to my father. I skirted around David's temper and continued to visit my father. But soon after, my father's condition took a turn for the worse, and he passed away. Jennifer and I were overwhelmed by the loss, but there was a mountain of tasks to handle. Dealing with paperwork, funeral arrangements, and other responsibilities was daunting, but keeping busy helped distract me. Then, knowing I was nearby, David muttered under his breath, "Now we can finally have a decent meal." His insensitive comment infuriated me, but I lacked the energy to argue and simply swallowed my words. Even though the funeral was over, my heart remained heavy. Surprisingly, he showed a willingness to help with sorting through my father's belongings. Perhaps reflecting on his past behavior, he actively participated in tidying up the house. "Have you gathered all the documents? Are these all of them?" His question reminded me of the safe my father had hidden away, and I asked David to check its contents as well. When he was hospitalized, I also remembered receiving the key to the safe from my father, and I handed it over to David. "The only things in the safe were these," David said, handing me some old bills and a document with a family tree that he claimed were taken from the inside of the safe. I hadn't been expecting much, but since he went to the trouble of giving me the key, I thought there might be something more significant inside. The actual contents were somewhat anticlimactic. Well, I thought, such is life, and decided to get back to the rest of the work still pending. The cleanup at my childhood home didn't finish in one day, but after a few days, it was completed. Finally able to take a breather, I was overwhelmed by a profound sense of exhaustion. It was then that my brother, back in New York, called. "I'm really sorry for leaving all the cleanup to you. Let me know if there's anything I can do to help." He apologized before getting to the point. "By the way, did you find the deed among the documents Dad was keeping? It might seem cowardly to bring this up after Dad has passed, but there's something I need to discuss with you, Barbara." He then started talking about inheriting our father's estate. My brother, who runs a company involved in various ventures, was considering expanding into the restaurant business. He apologized before getting to the point. He wanted the house, which was built in a unique style with cultural value, akin to the old traditional houses now popular for cafes. It seems that my brother's plan is to use the family home as is and open a cafe. It turns out Dad had given me permission a long time ago. In return, he said everything else would go to Barbara. I know it's late, but would you agree to this? My brother has always been fond of me and is still single. He's not interested in claiming a large inheritance for himself or his family. I wouldn't know what to do with our childhood home anyway. If you think it's best, then go ahead. I agreed to my brother's wishes and decided to transfer the rights to our family home to him. If I were to manage it, it would eventually have to be demolished. It's better if my brother can make good use of it, ensuring the home remains in some form. Thanks. Could you check if the deed is among the documents Dad left behind? David had organized all the documents in one place, so it should be among them. I promised to contact my brother as soon as I found the documents and hung up. I realized I hadn't gone through the documents since then. They should all be in a clear case I put together. Remembering the case of documents he gave me, I searched through it. However, no matter how much I looked, I couldn't find the deed my brother mentioned. That's strange. I put all the documents in here. Could it still be at the house? Worried I might have accidentally thrown it away, I decided to go check the house myself to avoid any more anxiety. I didn't want to continue living with anxiety in my heart, so I decided to go to my parents' house right away to check. Arriving at my childhood home, I was shocked. Where the house should have been, there was nothing but debris from what seemed to be a demolished building. Had I taken a wrong turn? But no, that can't be right. In a panic, I called Jennifer to explain the situation. After hearing about the cafe renovation plan and the cultural value of our childhood home, Jennifer, sensing my distress, said, "I'll come right now," and hung up. True to her word, Jennifer arrived at my location soon after. "Mom, what's wrong?" she asked, her long hair disheveled from hurrying. She looked at me with concern, panting. "I can't seem to find our house," I explained to Jennifer, gradually regaining my composure as I repeated the story. "Mom, you're not wrong. This place is definitely Grandpa's house." Indeed, if Jennifer had come straight here, then this was undeniably where my childhood home had been. Well, where it had stood. It had only been a few weeks since my father's funeral. I had no idea what could have happened. Could my brother know something? But we had just spoken on the phone. That couldn't be it. Which made the reason for the demolition even more puzzling. The site looked like it was still under construction, but there was no one in sight. What should I do in such a situation? Call the police? While trying to calm my confused mind with Jennifer's opinion, I noticed someone walking towards us from a distance. "Wait, is that Dad coming over here?" Jennifer exclaimed in surprise. I squinted to see the approaching figure more clearly. Just as Jennifer said, it indeed was David. Walking towards us with his suit sloppily worn. It's just past 3 p.m. now. Perhaps he's on his way back from some external appointments. Still, running into him here, of all places, is odd. My confusion only deepened with David's appearance. All I could do was wait for David to speak. As he got closer, I could see a faint smile on his face. Despite him being my husband, that expression sent a chill down my spine. "Oh, what a good place to find you too." David stopped in front of me and Jennifer without losing his smile. Both Jennifer and I were too taken aback to say anything, waiting for David's explanation. "This place will be cleared out and turned into a bed and breakfast." At his words, Jennifer and I both exclaimed in surprise. "What? What are you talking about?" Realizing that the scene before us was undoubtedly the site of our demolished family home, we were shocked. But there's no way we could just accept this. What on earth was David thinking? No matter how hard I tried to figure him out, the answer eluded me. "Hey, explain so we can understand. Is this your doing?" David's attitude, still sporting a faint smile, made me press him more forcefully. "Yeah, I did everything. We can't move forward without clearing the land first. I'm planning to build the bed and breakfast with the money I've saved up little by little and my retirement fund. Of course, you're going to contribute financially as well." He spoke in a somewhat pompous manner, showing no remorse. Could there possibly be a legitimate reason for this outrageous action? David seemed to sense our anger and confusion, feeling somewhat irritated by our reactions. He continued on as if I had no choice. I've always wanted to start something on my own. Everyone fails to recognize my talent and just gives orders. I can't be satisfied with that. So, I decided to operate a bed and breakfast here. David confidently declared this, then looked at our expressions again. However, such explanations only deepened our confusion. I'm sorry, but I don't understand at all what you're trying to say. The utter absurdity of his actions began to instill fear in me. I quit my job today. I told off everyone there who pissed me off and slammed my resignation letter on the table. The fact that Barbara's father passed away just now is a message to me. It's finally time for me to take the lead. David's rambling in his excited state was nonsensical, but his intentions were clear. In other words, he quit his job to run a bed and breakfast. He wants to be the boss without anyone's complaints, to move forward in life by converting this place into a bed and breakfast. This is Dad and Paul's property. Do you think it's okay to do this without permission? Since Dad had previously spoken of transferring the rights to the house and land to my brother, I can't believe he would have given them to David. It's unthinkable that my brother would deceive me, and it's abnormal for my husband to quit his job and demolish our family home without any consultation. No need for permission, I hold the deed. Being entrusted with sorting out the belongings means we're free to do as we please with what's left. As your husband, what I decide to do should be permissible. David responded to me and Jennifer as if it were only natural, showing no sign of guilt. That's no excuse at all, I yelled out as soon as David finished speaking. My patience ran out with his selfish, childish reasoning. This is my father's house. It was passed down to me and Paul by Dad. How can you, who aren't even blood related, do something like this on your own? David seemed to realize the seriousness of the situation for a moment in response to my rebuke. Although the faint smile disappeared from his face for a moment, he quickly justified his actions again. What is that way of speaking to your husband? Who do you think has been supporting your lifestyle up until now? You all should just silently follow what I say. David, with his face turning red, raised his voice without caring about his surroundings. Perhaps due to the extreme excitement, he began to gasp heavily. Seeing David like this, Jennifer suddenly burst into laughter. Wait a minute. Stop, Dad. Tears were even welling up in Jennifer's eyes. It seems she felt a mix of pity and humor from the bottom of her heart towards the absurd and comical behavior of her father, who had always tried to control her. Dad, don't you know? Gasping for breath, David focused on his daughter as Jennifer spoke to him. Grandpa's house was incredibly valuable. You just destroyed the house Uncle Paul was given. Jennifer said this, then suddenly turned serious. What you did is literally a crime. David's face rapidly lost color as he calmed down upon hearing his college-age daughter's calm point. What are you saying? How can you say such things to your father? Though he raised his voice, it lacked any real spirit or force. It seems he had realized his fault somewhere deep down. Trying to counter it with bluster was futile, especially after being called out by his daughter. Neither my brother nor I could ever condone such actions. I'm going to call Paul right away. The project to turn this place into a cafe is supposed to be in progress. David, knowing that my brother runs a company, understood the situation just from those words. What? That's horrible. We have press coverage and contracts already advancing. I'll call you back later. Please don't touch anything else there. After my hurried call, my brother ended the call in a flustered state. Just do not do anything further. This has turned into a huge mess." My brother's voice seemed to leak from the phone, making Jennifer and David's faces tense. It appears he had been plotting to build a bed and breakfast here from the moment he mentioned clearing out the belongings. He had been helping with the cleanup of our family home with that intention, searching for the deed. "I had no idea this house was going to be turned into a cafe. It's common sense to inform me of such important matters beforehand." David, who had been pale-faced just a moment ago, now began to shift the blame onto me and my brother despite his worse actions. His face regained its original brazenness, suggesting his actions were completely justified. "Please, don't do anything more. Paul is hurriedly contacting the partners now." Disgusted by David's shamelessness, I decided to wait for a call from my brother. Then, I noticed a man in a suit running towards us from across the street. "Excuse me, is Barbara here?" The man who offered his business card was Thomas, working as my brother's secretary at his company. He had been sent from New York, where my brother's company is located, on a business trip for the cafe opening and had rushed over after hearing about the current situation of our family home. "I was just in a meeting with the president of the company we're launching the cafe project with. The president is on his way here now, but the other party is very upset." Thomas said this and then looked at David's face before continuing. "I've heard most of the story from the president, but it seems a considerable amount of compensation liability will arise. Even though you're my sister's husband, you'll have to bear that responsibility." Up until now, David had only been scolded by me and Jennifer, so the reality hadn't fully hit him. Hearing the words compensation liability from a stranger in a suit made David's face turn pale again. "Mom, can we even afford to pay that? What's going to happen to us?" Jennifer's whisper seemed to be the final blow, as David weakly sat down on the spot. Supporting David, who had collapsed, we decided to return home for the time being. We invited my brother's secretary into our home to wait for my brother's arrival from New York. Although we understood the gravity of the situation, there was nothing we could do on our own. As time frustratingly passed and the day turned to night, my brother finally arrived. "Barbara, I'm sorry, but David will have to take appropriate responsibility." My brother said this with a solemn expression and began to explain the situation. The project to open a cafe using our family home had started some time after our father passed away. My brother's company is well known in the industry, and the other party had prioritized this project upon hearing it from my brother. That meant halting our company's ongoing projects to pour all our energy into the joint project with my brother. It was clear that canceling this cafe plan would result in tremendous damage. My brother was making every effort to keep this project alive. "But if our family home itself has been demolished?" I remembered the scene that had been in front of my eyes until a moment ago and inadvertently let the words slip out. "I've seen it myself just now, and it was indeed a sloppy demolition job. It'll take time, but since the materials are still there, it might be possible to restore it," my brother said with a heavy sigh, though his face remained stern. "David, I didn't want to say this, but what you did is a crime. It's not something that can be resolved with an apology, but you'll have to join in apologizing to everyone involved." David, told by my brother, remained pale-faced and frozen on the spot but slowly nodded. Just a few hours ago, he was so proudly talking about his future life plans, and now there's no trace of that. Having to expose my husband's disgraceful behavior in front of my own brother, I was filled with embarrassment. I had caused a huge mess simply because I failed to see through him. While my brother wouldn't blame me, I had no intention of staying with him any longer. On paper, David and I were still married, but in my heart, he had become a complete stranger. David, accompanied by my brother and the secretary to apologize to the related companies, faced unimaginable pain there. To explain the situation, the truth had to be told. As my brother explained the whole story to the other parties, those who had been calm towards my brother suddenly criticized him. David had believed his lack of recognition was due to others, but facing direct accusations of being a failure as a person, that belief easily crumbled. When he returned home with my brother, his eyes were vacant, as if he could collapse at any moment. Fortunately, everyone accepted the apology, on my behalf, of course. But as expected, they demanded proper compensation. David, following my brother around, must have heard enough about the specific amount of damages. It's no wonder he was overwhelmed by it. Unfortunately, I too had reached my limit. In front of David, who had slumped down, I presented the documents I had prepared. Now you finally understand why you're not appreciated. You're a failure as a person. I've had enough of you. I declared firmly to him and insisted he sign the divorce papers I had extended towards him. Hearing this from a wife who had been compliant until now, David began to cry. Please! Don't abandon me! What will become of me now? I've even quit my job. Aren't we a family that lived together until now? Despite only considering us as outlets for his stress before, his pleading words now had no effect on me. I continued to look at the divorce papers, ignoring his words. Saying anything to him now would be meaningless and wouldn't help him. After a while, realizing my resolve was firm, he slowly signed. It was over. We were now officially strangers. Months later, thanks to my brother's kindness, criminal charges were avoided, but David was left with a huge debt. In addition to bearing the liability for the damages of the halted project, he was ordered to pay compensation for his rash actions and verbal abuse towards us, resulting from our divorce. It was a natural consequence, yet he couldn't have imagined such a simple outcome. He must have realized the extent of the inconvenience he caused to many people during the apologies he made with my brother to various companies. The only silver lining was that his boss hadn't taken his resignation seriously, so he didn't lose his job. If he had lost his job as well, there would have been no way for him to repay the massive debt he had accumulated. However, the atmosphere at the company will probably become even harsher than before. Still, it was good that they forgave him for such an outrageous action. David lost his family and wealth, and his pride in his own excellence was shattered. This will probably be the greatest punishment for him. I was worried about how our divorce would affect Jennifer, but she is already an adult. She didn't take the situation as heavily as I thought she would. Everything will be fine with Mom around, and I'm already an adult. Whether she was trying to be considerate or not, Jennifer answered cheerfully. The project to renovate and rebuild our family home, led by my brother, managed to recover somehow. Though it seemed I would be able to live off the alimony from David and the inheritance left by my father, I was entrusted with running my brother's cafe. The people from the company that launched the cafe with my brother trusted me and gave me various tasks. Thanks to this, I am enjoying a more fulfilling life than the days I spent as a housewife. Being able to work in the place where I lived with my parents and brother is also a great joy. Marriage is not the only joy in life. I might have lost a certain sense of security that comes from being protected by someone, but in another sense, I gained freedom. My feelings are not dark and gloomy now. On the contrary, I feel more positive and bright. I have found a new purpose and am filled with hope.